Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle Blunt. I am a professional dominatrix working out of New York City, and I also work online and am available to you anywhere. And I am so excited about today's conversation with mommy's very special little kitten, Mars. And Mars, I would love if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Mars. I'm a leather dyke slash bag from Chicago. Um, Mommy's little kitten, as you said, and daddy's perfect pervert, and overall, a very good, eager little one.
I can agree with all of those those statements. Very good, very good. And I love the alliteration of perfect pervert. It was so nice. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I absolutely adore our dynamic and the growth that I've seen in like your explorations in kink. And I think it's just really exciting to be able to share some of what we've done together and some of your explorations outside of our dynamic as well. But first I would love to hear a little bit about how you found your way into my web, like what drew you to me, how did you find me, and like what made you decide to reach out. I think it's something that can be like really overwhelming for people, and so I'm super curious about what your experience was with that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it never felt um, like it wasn't something I knew that I wanted to do. It just kind of like happened in slow steps that I didn't really like put pieces together until now when I look back and I'm like, wow, they all fit so nicely. So I think I first became aware of you through one of your videos on like kink.com. And I remember being like um, so like I loved just the dynamic that was shown in that scene and like the caring vibe like between the two of you and like how beautiful that was and like it felt like something I hadn't seen before in porn and then also um, getting to see like a trans submissive or someone like genderqueer submissive was like really special to me and like kind of I think planted the seed that like maybe that could be me too. And then also the mommy dynamics between the two of you was a huge one. But it was interesting because I think I remember having the thought like, oh well, that's cool, but and maybe it's not for me. But it was for sure.
Yes, I can agree that it certainly seems like it's for you. But that's so interesting. I think the scene you're talking about is Mommy's Basement with Jackie Indigo, which was a super fun scene to shoot. It was an early pandemic scene where it was like lots of like queer, gay, femdom play taking place as I captured Jackie Indigo in my basement and had my way with them. And yeah, I think something that's so exciting about queer porn is it gives more people a chance to see themselves in different positions that maybe they like hadn't been. We're so influenced by the media that we see that being able to have those experiences of being able to see ourselves in certain dynamics that we might not have thought was for us. I know I had a woman femme sub for a while, and a lot of she was the photo bottom for a lot of my photos. And I remember just like this like very obnoxious troll on Twitter being like, that's not femdom, like you need a male sub. And I'm like, first of all, like femdom has like, it doesn't even talk about the submissive in the title. Like it like you are irrelevant to me right now. This is who my submissive is. That's what matters. And like that's who's actually getting in on the action, not this like random person on Twitter who has an opinion. But I remember that comment like really stuck with me because I've always played with the people that I'm attracted to, like across like gender spectrums. Um, and I don't think when I started making queer porn, it was always just who I was playing with at the time, and it was never a super like intentional thing. But I've gotten such positive feedback from it, so it's really nice to hear.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you said about the ideas, like these stereotypes about femdom. I think for sure, like that's just what I had seen, like in porn. So I was like, oh well, I guess that's just not for me. Um, yeah, but
Yeah.
I was wrong.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's great to be wrong, right? Um, yeah, and I would love to hear you talk a little bit about our dynamic, kind of how it started, because I think something that was really special and unique about our dynamic is it took place like primarily online. We almost got to play in person, but the pandemic got in the way, so we're still waiting for that special time. But I think another thing that a lot of people don't think is that um, well, I think that seeing a pro dom can be really overwhelming. I think that virtual domination is a much more like accessible way, both whether there's like not someone in your location or just like the barrier to seeing someone in person just feels too high. I think that virtual domination sessions are such a good way, and like virtual training, something that I really like to do in my practice is like work with people to like build skills, build community, like get in touch with their sexuality and their desires in a way that is like guided by mommy's gentle or very firm hand. And I'd love to hear a little bit about what that experience was like for you.
Okay, so I remember spending a long time like researching you and then thinking about subscribing to your OnlyFans. And it took a long time before I finally did, and then after I did, it took more time before I like reached out and like actually introduced myself. So it was a lot of slow baby steps. But I think, yeah, OnlyFans and like messaging back and forth was something that felt like way more doable for me. Like I think I hadn't had the idea in my head that like I wanted to see like a dom, like a pro dom in person. That was just something that felt like way too unattainable for me to do. Um, so messaging was way more doable and like yeah, I feel like it wasn't a conscious decision on my end. It just kind of unfolded like in this really beautiful way of just like connecting back and forth and like I don't know, I'm curious to hear from your end like what was it like did you have this plan beforehand of like what you were gonna do with me and like what your
Oh,
plans
mommy's
were?
divine intervention. I think what some one of the few things I like about OnlyFans is that I feel like there's a really like a fairly low barrier to entry that like that this like accessibility, like you can like chat with the person that you were jerking off to this video about and like talk about that like dynamic and like what was it like shooting that scene and like sexting, and like really just like slow building. I think something that I've always really appreciated in like all of the types of sex work that I have done is building relationships. It has always been what's most fulfilling to me. So I think like I'm always kind of looking like everything I have online, like this interview is just like planting like seeds and creating like a robust web so that the right people find me and like you found me, so like I know that whatever I'm doing is working. So I think it wasn't so much as like you send me the first message I'm like I know exactly what I'm gonna do, but like we like message back and forth a little bit, and i I'm like intrigued, I'm interested, you're sharing a lot, you're sharing like intimate and vulnerable things, and I feel like we're kind of co-creating something that feels really special and being able to build from there. And I think that like I keep saying the word accessible, but I'm not sure what other word I'm trying to mean. I think like sometimes the barrier of like I haven't had any kink experiences and now I'm gonna hire a pro dom and go into like a 2 hour scene and I have no idea what that could look like is really overwhelming. I think it can be like pretty nerve wracking to hire a sex worker in general. Plus, if you don't have specific experiences to be like, oh, like this is to like point to and be like, this is what I want. I think, we can sometimes kind of like freeze up and not communicate our desires. And I think some of the work that we've done really seems to be around communicating desires, like figuring out what they are, exploring some things. I mean, like, oh, maybe not that, maybe this, like I think I don't remember if you started calling me mommy immediately, but I think it like was a slow burn into
Yeah,
land.
I was thinking about that a little bit. Like, I remember some of my first messages, like, yeah, definitely calling you mistress,
Yeah.
and then thinking like, it's just gonna be mistress. It's never gonna be mommy. So I don't know when that,
Every time.
I don't know when that like changed, but definitely I noticed a huge shift in like me once we started like going down that path of like mommy, and like when you called me little one for the first time, I was like, whoa, this feels like way better than anything I've ever experienced. So it definitely was like a path to unlock communicating my desires and like, yeah, like what you said, figuring them out. Like, I think even if I did have this idea of like a goal that I wanted to see a pro dom in person, for sure, like I wouldn't have been able to communicate like what I even wanted to do. So a lot of my work with you on OnlyFans like really helped me like get in touch with like what kind of things would I even want to do, and like what about that is interesting to me.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. And I think it's such an important space to like have that self exploration. I think one thing that we do and that I like to do is having you keep a submissive journal for me has been really nice, both as like a way to check in, but also just like largely for you to like document. And I think like I honestly I haven't gone through like the whole thing in a while, but like I feel like the growth in there is just like exponential. And I'm so curious what that experience of like keeping that journal has been like, as well as like when you like flip back through it, and kind of like see where you started with me and like where you're at now, what that feels like.
Yes, I think one huge thing I learned just about myself was that written communication was like a lot easier for me than talking. Um, so I remember I started keeping the journal once we switched to also doing like video sessions. And that was very, very helpful because I remember the first time we had a video call, I was like, I think I couldn't really talk that much. So having things written down for you to like point to was super helpful. And then, yeah, looking back is fascinating to see. Like, I can see my growth from like journal entry number one to like the most current one. Just in like, what's been really cool is like seeing things like having said like I would want to do this thing in the future, and then now looking to like I did those things. Like seeing a pro dom in person, that was like a huge goal that I had. And then getting to like read about what I wrote about experiencing that for the first time was really cool. And then getting to see like my dynamic with Daddy with Mistress Sunny unfold is also like really cool because I can see that documented in the journal as well. And then, yeah, seeing like all the things that I've been able to explore with you has been awesome.
Yeah, I think it's like a really fun artifact too. Like I don't give it like as a submissive task with a thought of it being an artifact, but I was just in this retrospective of our dynamic. Um, I was thinking of it like that, which I hadn't really conceptualized it before, but it's so fun to kind of see all of that. And I don't know, I feel like you've kind of skyrocketed. It felt like, I don't know, I feel like you've made so much progress, especially in the last 6 months of what your goals were and what you wanted to be, what you were hopeful for, what you were excited for, and actually doing those things and having those experiences in your body. And I don't know, are you proud of yourself? I'm super proud of you. So I'm curious, how does it feel to have some of those things that you wrote almost 3 years ago now, have now that you were oh, I hope one day I can do this. That's now a memory that you've done.
Um, it's hard for me to say yes, I'm proud of myself, but I am, um, thanks to help from hearing it from other people, kind of helps me believe it as well. Um, what I think is really interesting is a lot of these goals that I had were very much collaborative with you. Like you helped me figure out what I think some of your tasks were write a list of goals. And so that looking back on those lists is really cool because I think you definitely helped me pull those out of myself that I can maybe didn't know that was even a goal. Um, I forget what your question was.
You did answer it. I asked if you were proud of yourself, which I was
Oh,
proud of you for answering too. Um, yeah, and I think one thing that we kind of worked on was figuring out your relationship to community, was something that I think is really important to me. Is I think whether even just be a kink friendly therapist. I think having someone else. I talk about this in most of my interviews, but having someone else that you can talk about your experiences with is just makes for a healthier dynamic in general, and makes the taboo nature of it less stigmatized by being able to talk about it outside of just an insular dynamic. And I think especially I have a lot of a lot of people come to see me as a queer lesbian dominatrix, and so I've had experiences of younger queer people coming to see me either after a bad experience in the scene, usually with a cis man, or a not having any experiences and really wanting to be just really thoughtful about this and I want to make sure my first experience is as good as possible, so I will go with someone as experienced as possible. And I think, I don't know, it's really fun. I really enjoy the dynamics that I have where someone is very interested in both themselves as well as leather and community in this really robust sense. And I think especially when younger queer people come and see me, I really encourage folks to find community, to go to a workshop, to go to a play party if that's something that feels comfortable with you, and and find friends and find community to build with, skillshare with, find play partners, especially if that's something that they want but feels overwhelming. And I think, um, it's something that we've talked about a lot. And I'm curious if you wanted to chat a little bit with about your journey seeking a different relationship with intimacy to then seeing pro doms and communities. If you could kind of talk a little bit about that path.
can you
Yeah, I'll ask it
reword your
more.
question?
I'll reward that. I'll ask it in different parts. If you could start talking about your journey seeking intimacy. So I'm asking it in this framework because I'm thinking of how you've talked about, um, like your relationship with intimacy, um, to seeking out pro doms to finding community. And I'd love if you could bring us back a little bit to like some of your earlier explorations of just in general being like, I want to change my relationship to intimacy.
Okay, thank you. Um, yes, shout out to my therapist, who was a huge help. Um, she's really like the sweetest. Like, um, I remember when I first started seeing her, um, I think she also like does work with like somatics and like different, yeah, just like getting in touch with like your feelings in your body. And that was like something I did not understand and like couldn't do. And she was like, "What are you feeling in your body when we're talking about this?" I'm like, "I don't know."
You're like red.
So yeah, it was she was definitely a huge help in like helping me navigate like even connecting with like what was going on in my body. And then slowly like we started incorporating things like sitting on the same couch together, which was like difficult for me, or like sitting closer together to like sitting next to each other where we're like touching, and like these things of like, yeah, the physical like component of that was like a very big like barrier in my life where I felt like if I want to explore like any sort of emotional intimacy or sexual intimacy, I can't because I can't be physically close to somebody. Um, so that was like the baby steps that got me to where I am now. And then I do would love to talk about this experience that I had seeking a professional cuddler. Like I think looking back, that was also like such a huge step for me. Um, just getting to like experience and communicate around like being physically near somebody. That was like super helpful for me. Um,
I've heard such cool things about professional cuddlers too, and that does sound like I feel like the opportunities to like I've seen some videos to like talk about consent in a non-sexual context can be really really helpful, like a transferable
yes,
skill set. Yeah.
yes. I remember when I saw the professional cuddler for the first time, like that was one of the first experience I had of like negotiating and where we really talked a lot about like what are some things like what are your limits, like what do you not want to do, what would you like to do. And then I remember one of the things she asked me was, um how do you know if something is a no for you? And that like really like blew my mind. I was like, no one's ever asked me that before. So we really like unpacked that and that was super helpful. And then another exercise we did which was also helpful was once we established like what my boundaries limits were, she would ask me to do things outside of those so that I could say no. And like that was a really powerful exercise that it definitely like helped me build the confidence to know when I want to say no and then to be able to actually do it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like I got a lot out of that experience.
That sounds great. There's definitely something that should be taught in school, just in general. That's a great skill set, and I feel like I think something that like I think is so impressive about you too is that you're like these are the things I want to work on, and then you seek out the right people to work on it with. So they're like, is that like space for exponential growth? You know, and I think a lot of people like want similar things, but it's so hard to like take that first step. And it sounds like for you it was like finding the right therapist who was like really open and supportive of these explorations and seems like really like just like on your team and like down to try like different thing and like support you in different things.
Yes, she definitely had a lot of patience with me.
Um, yeah, and so I feel like I don't know, it's so interesting because I feel like we're now starting talking about like this like relationship, solidifying this like relationship with yourself so you can like be comfortably in relationship with other people, like exploring relationship with other people and like moving into like the realm of exploring kink and sexuality. And just to circle it back to what we were talking about before about community, I'm curious about, so you've now seen some professional dominatrices, you've gotten to session in person with daddy, which I know you are thrilled about, and see some pro doms in your hometown as well, or a pro dom. But I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about what it's been like, exploring the kink community and like making friends in the kink community.
Yeah, that was something that felt very scary and intimidating to me. Um, I remember, well, social media has been a huge help in like helping me connect with people. And then I remember one of my friends, um, who's my friend now, like she reached out to me first and was like, "Hey, are you in Chicago? Like we should do something together." And then I remember feeling like terrified by that proposition. It took a while to like figure out how that would even be possible for me. So we like hung out first and did like no playing together at first, which was helpful. And then, yeah, and then we played together, like our second meeting. Um,
And
can you?
you're talking about your like a kinky alt that you have, like that you would use to like, I think you used started it to like engage with my content, maybe with daddy's content, and then started posting some photos and kind of like building from there, which I also think is great. Like it's a great way to explore and like see what's out there as well as like have a way for those kind of more organic connections. And I think you
Mhm.
were talking a little bit about like that first play date with the friend, or the first hangout not involving play. And now I know that you've been like doing more things like demo bottoming, and it just like I don't know, it's just really exciting to witness.
Yeah, I think I remember talking to you and like one of your like tasks or advice for like seeking community was like to go to a workshop. And I remember when you first proposed that, I was like, "Oh no, I can never do that." Um, but that was honestly very helpful advice. And so once I like built up the courage to do it, I did go to a workshop and like that felt like a really good place where I started like meeting people and like becoming exposed to like people that are in the scene in Chicago and like the leather dykes here. And then that's kind of when I started to get exposed to like what other events in Chicago. And then I started going to those events and then meeting people. And then that's kind of where I started like connecting with people to potentially play with.
It's so exciting. Also, it's just like really is just like I feel like shows how like that slow progression just like really builds. Like like diving in is not head first, like is not for everyone, and I feel like you've built so many skills. Like being a good submissive is a skill, and like being able to advocate for yourself, being able to like know like what your no's feel like and be able to articulate them, to like know what your yeses feel like and be able to like pursue them, to know like when like someone is like, I think maybe you should go to a workshop, and you're like, absolutely the fuck not. When to like maybe reassess, like know if that's like if that no stays a no, and like know what's changed within you that you are then able and excited about changing that decision, because like I hope I didn't pressure you, but like I don't know. I hope not, but or if it was like exciting pressure.
It
But
was not necessarily like pressure, but it was like you telling me something I already knew that I
yeah,
wanted to do, but like didn't want to admit to doing it.
yeah.
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 So it's like not always easy to hear.
The pressure of being seen. Um, yeah, and I remember, I feel like I remember being like, okay, I think it's time, and suggesting it. And it really felt like it was like 2 weeks later, you're like, because one came up right after. I feel like suggested it, and then there was like a boo blacking event or something like that in your area like 2 weeks later, and you're like, oh fuck.
Yeah, and then I did it.
You did it. I was
And
so
then yeah, it really has unfolded very quickly. Because
yeah.
I went to that event, and then shortly after, like, I went to my first play party, and that was a whole interesting experience. Um, and since then, I've been to like a couple more play parties.
Would you care to elaborate on what you mean by interesting experience? I feel like people would be super interested in hearing like what like someone who is new to the scenes take on a play party is. And I also want to say like the reason why I suggest people go to workshops as is like a really great introduction is because I think it's really nice to have an activity to be doing. Like I think a hands-on workshop where like you can partner up with someone or something like that. You're not just like listening and then leaving without talking to anyone. But I feel like a workshop is kind of like the perfect mix of like not being as awkward as a munch and like having to maintain conversation the whole time when you don't know anyone and the only thing you might have in common is this one particular interest, and like diving right into a play party where you're then gonna like have to negotiate like pick up play or like stand awkwardly in a corner or stand like sexy awkwardly in a corner. It might be like fun for some people, but I love a workshop just in general. Learning's always super helpful. But yeah, I would love to hear about like how that workshop kind of dovetailed right into a play party and what your experience of it was like and how it's kind of transformed.
Okay, one of your advice that you gave me was helpful. You said like, can you bring a friend? And so I
Yeah.
did. I brought one of my like vanilla friends, but I say vanilla, but like she's definitely super curious.
Yeah.
Um, so I brought her along, and like she's way more like outgoing and like talkative, so that was like really helpful because I could just like tag along with her and then get into conversations with people. Um, but yeah, it was really just at that event. They're the people who did that event like organized the play party, so then I got to meet like the people who were like organizing it, and then that felt way less scary and intimidating. So I was like, okay, these are like actual people who are going to be there, and I got to meet people who were also going to be at the party. So then that felt less intimidating because I like didn't know what to expect because I never been to a play party. So getting to know some people who were going to be there was helpful in like reducing my anxiety because I was like, okay, I know some people who are going to be there. My other advice that was super helpful is like planning play ahead of time because that also felt intimidating, like going in with no agenda and then having to navigate in that space where there's like people and it's loud and there's a lot going on. That was helpful. And I think what made the my first play party a success was having like an agenda beforehand. Um,
Yeah, agendas are great. Like, I don't know. It also just feel it. I don't know. Like in this retrospective, I really like just hear like how intentional you are and like really just like waiting until you're ready, but like not just like waiting passive like this waiting as like a passive activity, but like a very active activity of like building relationships, building skill sets, building like self knowledge and like self curiosity and inquiry until you feel like things that you thought were going to be completely inaccessible to you feel like just a little step, you know? And I think that that's something that's really exciting. Um, something that I also think is really exciting is how I seduced you into the mommy web and how that exploded into a daddy web. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about like mommy daddy dynamics, parental dynamics in kink for you, what they like mean to you, how maybe they've helped you explore. I heard you talking a little bit when you were talking about mommy's basement with Jackie Indigo, how I kind of heard some of like the nurturing dynamic that was present there, and I would just love to hear you talk a little bit about like what that's been like for you to explore.
Yeah, I think what's so special about the mommy daddy like parental dynamic is like the space that it allows for me to be like scared and nervous and inexperienced, and like all of that is like very much welcomed and like celebrated and like can be part of the play, which is fun for me. Yeah, and finding that like nurturing, guiding dominance has been like very helpful for me to like figure out and explore things in a way that like felt good, and I think feel is, I don't know, it just feels very aligned with like who I am really deep down. I think just that fact really like helped me explore and like open up a lot more. Um,
Yeah, it sounds like also like when I called you my like special little one or something like that. I mean something like that. It's carved into your thigh, into your
yeah,
thigh. um,
it's written permanently on me.
on your body. So I think something about that might have resonated with you.
A little
Yeah.
bit, yeah.
And then I think kind of like cracked that open. But like I don't know, it makes sense to me too, like in leather community and like BDSM leather community, being able to like be introduced into a scene like inducted by mommy and daddy feels like a very like leather mommy and daddy feels like a very special a special thing, and like it kind of makes sense to me with like what you were looking for and like how you approached your journey too, as well as like who you are.
Yeah, like I'm curious to hear from your end too, but I think some of my hesitations towards like mommy or calling somebody mommy specifically, interestingly, more than daddy.
Mommy's more taboo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, there was like a lot of that like taboo, like stereotype hesitation that like I think was what was holding me back.
Yeah.
But really glad that I got over that.
Yeah, I have theories on both the why is mommy harder for people to say, and what was the other part of what you were saying?
I don't
Oh, yeah,
remember.
I got it. I think something that people think with like parental play is that it necessitates an interest in like incest play, which it can, and that can be a fun taboo part of the role play, but also like I think a lot of it has to do with like the nurturing, guiding roles and just like the archetype. And I think sometimes the like bump between like, oh, mommy, like I have a mom, like I feel like sometimes that's a harder thing for people to get over. Um, but also fun to like get over and then into is really great. Um, so I think that's something that I see that comes up with people. I also have a lot of people who come to me, call me mistress for like a week, and then it's like, mommy, oh mommy, and I don't know what it is about my branding or like what content I have out there, but most people don't come to me calling me mommy at first, which is interesting because I feel like I'm always referring to myself as mommy. And maybe it's just like I've been doing this so long, so much of my stuff is also mistress. Or I'm just like very persuasive and like if mommy's what I'm into right now, people will call me mommy. Um,
That might be it.
yeah. I'm just very persuasive. And then I think based on my extensive somatic research, I think that some people find mommy stuff more taboo because if you're like thinking about archetypes of parental figures, um, mommy is the one who is there, and mommy is the one who is providing you with emotional support. Daddy is the one who like shows up, and like this is not like this I'm not saying anything like making broad generalizations. I'm just talking about like archetypally. Um that's what it is. And I think people have more expectations of mothers in general of like perfect attunement, perfect attachment. And I think a lot of folks do have more intimate dynamics with their their moms. Or even like just what you're seeing in media, like we are talking about so much about how media impacts you, like whether or not it's your personal experience, like it's probably part of your personal experience because of the canon of media. And I think that that can make it feel more, even more taboo. um that's part of my thought. Do you have any thoughts on to like why it feels that way?
I don't know. Maybe, I mean, I think maybe for me, it was just something that like I hadn't heard that much. Like I think daddy, the calling your partner daddy or something like that, like is very common and like pretty much like accepted. But hearing somebody call somebody mommy in like a sexual context was like very foreign to me. Um, and then I think also just like my baggage. I think it was like, what does it say about me if I call somebody mommy? Like, do I have mommy issues? I do. So it was like,
Everyone does.
yeah. So it just felt like, interesting to accept that fact. But yeah, I think there's something very special about mommy that's like very unique
Yeah,
to the mommy dynamic that's
I think
different from any other kind of dynamic.
yeah, and I think I just love I love a parental figure. Like love a leather daddy, love mommies, like but and I think that there's something too about the like what you're seeing in media of the heteronormativity of like straight vanilla girls calling their partner daddy who's the same age of them, and that being like very popular in media for like the last like 5 years. I feel like there's so many like memes about it, and I think it feels like almost vanilla at this point, like in like I
Yeah.
think it's like typically like a man that's being called daddy by like a partner I feel like of the same age is what we're seeing in media right now, and it feels like it like just became like this like term of endearment. Like I feel like it got detached from like also from like leather culture or like gay culture, and I think it's also fun to then like explore those dynamics in like a queered relationship like you are with daddy and being able to explore that in a different way. But I think I don't know, I think media plays such a role on us and such an influence of both what we of like limiting possibilities as well as creating like space to like kind of fill in the gaps. Interesting to think about. um Okay, so well, first of all, I just want to take a moment to say how proud I am of you, and just like being able to like reflect like this is really really fun. And as we start wrapping up the conversation, I'll ask you at the end if there's anything else you want to bring up. But I really want to ask like, do you have like any takeaways for people who are new to exploring the scene, who feel like really overwhelmed and contacting a professional? Yeah, like what, like I don't know, I feel like you've had such a lovely journey like taken at your own speed, and I'm curious like what advice you would give folks. And I think specifically too because I feel like there's still some like stigma for like of hiring a sex worker, even though I think it's like such a great way to explore desire and like have this space that's like for yourself to be able to be like, you know, like this is what I want to explore. I want to explore it like with this dominatrix and like really get to know what I want, whether I can like continue exploring it in this context or so like I can take some of those skills in my personal relationships. But I know it can be like a big barrier, and I'm curious like what your takeaways are.
Okay, advice for pronouns. Yeah, I think for me, it has been a huge part of like who I am and like my journey has been like my interactions and like um, relationships with and experiences I've gotten to have like with pronouns. So I think my advice, if you're thinking about it, um, is do your research and like find somebody who like really speaks to you. Um, and so yeah, like go to their website and like look at their social media and like I think you just kind of know. Like I feel like for me there was always like a moment where I was like, okay, yeah, this is the person who like I feel like I want to connect with and like they can offer something that I'm seeking. And for sure, um, like playing with the pro dom was like a much more like safer way for me to explore kink because it was way more intimidating to try to um like pursue it out like in the wild. It was like way more hard. So it definitely gave me like the tools that I needed and the structure that I needed to like explore these things and like yeah, take what I learned there and like apply it to like any other experience that I have. Like I think that structure is very helpful just in general in any dynamic or experience.
Totally. I feel like the space to ask for what you want is such like a negotiated space to like express and explore desire is such a gift. And like hearing you talk about your journey and just like you've given yourself like so many gifts and like so many experiences to get to grow into like the space that you are in and now. It's really exciting.
Okay, and I wrote down specific notes as a
Yes.
takeaway for people. Okay, advice number one, like take it slow. I think that was just like a huge message for me that I really needed to take in is like try not to let yourself like get caught up in like what other people are doing and like what their pace is. Like everybody kind of has their own pace and their own path and like that's okay. That was like a huge just thing for me that's like really helpful. Um and yeah, like if you're trying to reach out to people like in person, um my advice is to do something that's like low stress. So like go like grab coffee or something instead of trying to like jump head first into like doing an activity or like playing. Um, Another one is that's another piece of advice that's been really helpful, just like to trust your gut. Like just like if it doesn't feel right, then like just take a step back and like don't do things just because you think you have to. That's just like a huge life advice that's been very helpful for me. Um, and I think for the most part, like people are nice and like want to get to know you. And so try to like reach out to people and like approach people. That's just general advice for socially anxious people. Is like people are nice and like for the most part aren't like trying to be mean.
Yeah, and I love what you're talking about too. About you're talking about like some vetting tactics too, of like go out for coffee first, like trust your gut. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like the gut vetting is such an important tool, and also like it does like require you to be like somewhat in touch with like how you're feeling, and like that early work that you were talking about that you were doing with your therapist and with the professional cuddler of like what does your no feel like. I feel like that um is kind of doing some of the work that like is helping you like be able to negotiate these scenes, be able to like vet people, be able to like check in with yourself to see like if this feels like it might be like an okay space to explore some of your desires, and if you feel like you're in an okay space to be able to communicate uh in a way that feels good to you. And yeah, I don't know, I think it's all like really really great advice, that I think is great. Um, okay, well, as we're wrapping up, Mars, I'm curious if you have any comments, questions, concerns, thoughts, anything else you wanted to make sure was included in this.
I don't think so. I think we kind of covered a lot of things.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of things. Okay, well then I'll just thank you again. Thank you so much for chatting with me about this. It's been such a joy training you and working with you and getting to see you grow, and is just such a delight. And for anyone who is listening, you can find me at mistressblunt.com. All of my links are at bluntlinks.com, and all of my social media gets deleted, so I just won't be sharing that. And Mars, if you wanted to share your kinky Twitter, you're welcome to, and if not, we don't have to.
Yeah, my Twitter and Instagram are on underscore my way to underscore Mars.
It's very cute. I highly recommend.
Yeah,
Okay, well, thank you so
thank you.
much. I'll stop the recording now.